There we go. So I will say good morning to everyone. We are second and third movements today. And so I'll start by giving you an A. Great. Good. Okay, good. Okay, so let's warm up our vibrato by playing the first phrase of the second movement. I always feel like when I get here I need to slow everything down a little bit after the adrenaline of the first movement. I always feel like I need to slow down. So let's go for slightly over wide, just to really, feel like, especially as it's the morning, to feel like we're really opening up. Like, let's hear some oscillations of the vibrato. So we'll play the first phrase in its entirety just to wake up the left hand. So 1, 2, 3. Great. Okay, so there's so many different types of sound we can really think about in this opening. But let's start with the first sort of 2 bars. So we're really looking for like the warmest color we can find. So if we just play a C and look for that color. And I have to say, I really think about this first knuckle here. It's hard to see. Going back and, really make, that's what I say when I think of an oscillation of vibrato, that's what I'm looking for. So then, and I keep my thumb quite stable. And, if we're talking about different types of vibrato, this is verging on a bit of an arm vibrato, like really wide, but sort of, it gets us a fat sound. So let's try it again. 2, 3. Great, and then the difficulty is maintaining that sound through the next few notes. So it's often easiest on the first note because we have that beautiful C to do. And then the next 2, so let's play for the violin. So the second note, which is the third beat of the bar. Really widen up. I should be able to see through the screen that your fingers are your hand is actually moving wide. I don't want to see little tight vibrato. Let's get the morning, vibrato going now. 4th finger. Yeah, that one's tricky. Luckily, we're not on it for very long. So, one more time. First 2 bars. Let's see if we can get that sound to sustain through those bars. 2, 3. Great. So, really thinking that note as well. The beginning of the second bar needs to actually be deeper than our first note, doesn't it? Because the crescendo goes there. I mean, when you think of that hairpin, it's really just warmth, isn't it? So the second bar is even warmer than the first bar. So why don't we play the down bow of the first bar, just the first beat, and then the first beat of the second bar, and see if we can get that even richer and even warmer. So 2, 3, 2, 3, second bar. Maybe that one needs to be faster, but wide. Try again. 2, 3, first bar. 2, 3, second bar. Yeah, good. Now let's put it into context. First 2 bars. 2, 3. Good. Now, just because it would be remiss of me not to do it, I think we should try with the actual, let's try not splitting the bow for the third beat. Let's see if we can actually, instead of using our bow to make this warm sound, see if it could just be the vibrato. It might make us play a little more mezzo forte rather than forte. So 1 bar for the first bar, 1 bar for the second, just to see what that feels like. 2, 3. Yes, I find that very difficult. Why don't we try the other way round? Up bow. We saw last week there was some. I can't remember which quartet they were. Started up bow, which I find unbelievably difficult. But let's have a go. 2, 3. I mean, to be honest, once you've started, it's okay, isn't it? It's just getting the starting. That. But if you can find a way, let's just try that one more time, because the crescendo sounds very natural. 2, 3. Oh, it feels great. But now, I don't like starting the piece that way, personally. So now, for me, I'm going to go back to down bow, but I want it to sound like that. So let's do the whole first phrase and really think of now going to the 4th bar, maybe a little bit of a brighter, more sort of hopeful sound at the beginning of that 4th bar, the D for us. One more time. 2, 3. So in my view, in bar 5, that sforzando comes from the fact that the first beat is a quaver. So the first beat's a quaver, comes off, and then it has some sort of a breath somehow to get that sforzando. Is really like a sort of anxious, forward feeling, rather than something that's heavy. So if we could just try from bar 4, from the top of that crescendo, that hairpin. And then we've got our forte sforzando, and then our pianissimo, and then the piano. There's so many different dynamics. And to be honest, I always think of the pianissimo as just, it's just like that echo, isn't it? And then the piano travels. So the feeling like, the reason it's piano is because we're sort of going somewhere, rather than feeling that it's just a step up. It's just more, the feeling is very different. So bar 4, 2, 3. Off. Great. So just that, let's just do bar 7. Just really feel the connection of each of those quavers, and we're really, I love the feeling on the up bow, like really linking the notes together. 2, 3. Great. And really feel the difference now that we have that full 2 crotchets in bar 8. Da, dee, and then a new color. Great. Good. Okay. One more from bar 4, please. And just connect those colors together, and then we'll go on. violin joins the upbeat to bar 9, I always think of the color of the sound as being like a little less rich somehow, a little like a faster kind of bow, something that really blend, like thinking of blending rather than something so personal like one voice. So like a lighter bow, maybe a bit further, less sort of flat hair, maybe a bit further away, closer to the fingerboard maybe. So thinking about how it would blend with the second violin. Let's just go from that upbeat to bar 9. 1, 2. And then this is the opposite. This is where the vibrato really, this is where you want to make the most personal sound you can. And sometimes it depends on where you've got to in the phrase. Sometimes I think it's like a more feeling, and sometimes I think it's the opposite, like a really sort of like the bit with the second violin is quite like open, and then it's more like a personal thought, like you're reflecting on it. Then one more time from upbeat to bar 9. 1, 2. Great. The pianissimo that we have in bar 17, I think just go into a viola color. So actually it's not so precious in some ways in our color. It's a little more simple because we're thinking of the lower octave and really blending, but it's just us. So it's always switching in your mind if you are the main voice, and it happens for all instruments, but in this opening, in the first violin part, there are so many different textures and ways that you want to find the sound. And I always find that if you think of who you're playing with and what kind of sound you want to make to either blend with them or not, it helps you find that color, that everyone talks about color. It's always hard to know what color is. And it's more just a different type of sound that you're making. And in this opening, I think that's the way to sort of start by thinking, yes, okay, am I with them? If I'm with them, how do I blend with them? But if I'm on my own, what can I do to make my sound more unique, like more different to everyone else? So let's just try that pianissimo. Actually, why don't we go from bar 16, the fortissimo, and then just think the pianissimo with the viola color, nice and low as well because it's an open C string, so just be careful. And then when we get to that it doesn't have to be on the G string, but it's quite nice to make a kind of fluffy, very soft, beautiful sound. So bar 16. Great. And if it's anything to practice that, it's this sort of really soft touch on that G string. Doesn't need to project at all, isn't it? It's one of those moments that it's just completely, everybody's just waiting, and you can just make something really soft, almost like has a lot of fur on it. The sound doesn't have that directness that we've been finding throughout the rest of it. Great. Okay, so let's move on to this fugue. We first violin start at bar 24, so we'll start bar 24. I think I always start down bow here. I actually can't remember because I think I probably do both, but I definitely think I start down bow. So 2, 3. like me, you've been playing forte for at least a line, and you realize you shouldn't be. That you should save that color until right at the end there, or else it just gets too much. Okay, so bowings, it's complicated, I think, this opening. I think you can do many, many different things. I tend to do a few, I can tell you where I do a couple hooks. You know, in bar 27, I tend to do the end of that bar on an up. And then I tend to do in 31 2 down bows. Just because it always feels more comfortable when I get to it. But I never feel confident about, you know, like committing. I always think I'll try something different and I don't. I think I usually do that. And then I do a mixture in the middle. What's interesting about this fugue, actually, and I find it a lot in this movement, is that for the first time, like in the first movement, it's often first violin led. The whole sound is the first violin. And I find in the fugue here, most of the time, we are a supporting role. And actually, it's quite unusual that even when it gets to the main moments in this fugue, it's usually not the first violin voice. And balancing that is actually quite challenging. How do we play with enough support but not overtake the sound? So finding a sort of sustained, quite intense color without blasting, you know, because you're tempted to really play out because it feels like that's the kind of music. But you have to find a way to bring it down. So something a little more reserved somehow in the kind of sound, probably just like a slower bow, generally, not allowing yourself to really open up with the bow, that also helps. Because most of the time, other people have the theme, and they're the one that drives this fugue. I mean, we have it at the beginning, and we have a couple other times, but usually it's in a really great register, there's no problem about bringing it out. And then we just have to back off. So let's just try that again. Bar 24. So really feeling the swell of this fugue, this first bar in our bow. 3, 2, 3. Great, and we'll just stop there just to think about a few things. So we have our fugue subject. Great, always think about the rests and the end. So we're looking at bar 25 in the first. Da, 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 ba, ba, ba. Always thinking of how we come off that quaver. Really, and I think that applies for everyone because the energy in the rest is what helps us for the next thing. So no matter what you do, making sure that comes off. And then we're in accompaniment roll. So especially bar 29, the balance is very, very difficult with the second violin. It's really hard for that to come out. So just completely back off. What I find I have to work on is being really rhythmic because it's easy to be either self-indulgent with some of these rhythms or just not exactly perfect. And I think if you're not exactly perfect, you end up sort of disturbing the pulse, because I think here we just want a really steady feeling. So let's just try that from bar 29 and just absolutely subdivide and just try and keep it as still and as calm as possible. And again, being really precise when it comes da-dum, ba-ba-bum, that's really clear. So bar 29, so 2 and 3 and... Great. Let's just think about the bar 35. where we have the melody, if we play that how it feels most comfortable, let's just try that, playing it quite comfortably. So bar 35, just feel really, you know, open and warm. So 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, it just rings. It's on the E string, it's bright. Now, if we play it like that, we are in trouble for the next sort of 7 bars, because and we've given it away too soon. So I think we need to compress our emotions and our E string. I mean, you can play it on the A string, but here I feel it needs that slight steeliness. So if use about half the amount of bow you just used. So that felt like quite comfortable for me. You know, I used quite a lot of bow, the violin's nicely ringing. Now use much less bow, but keep the intensity in the sound. So it's not loud, it's intense, but slightly, you know, there's a slight edge. So 2, 3. Yeah, and then we go to the lower strings again. Do you see what I mean? It feels a bit uncomfortable. But I think if you use that kind of sound, it helps the feeling of like tension starting in this passage. And it doesn't give it away and just feels comfortable. If you compare that to how we play bar 24, so that's why it's quite nice in bar 24, which is almost the same notes, right? We just don't have the G sharp at the end. That's why it's quite nice to play that one on the A string, because actually in some ways it's a little more innocent. Let's just play 24 again, having had that feeling of 35. Play 24. 3, 2, 3. Yeah. So it's like a little calmer. It has, you know, lighter bow, and then we go back to 35. Just play the first 2 bars. 2, 3. Yeah. So for me, there's a huge difference in sound. And I think you can find that. I think if you're finding you want to move the bow, you need to write like slow bow or something really crazy on your part to remind you not to do it. And I promise there's no balance issue there in any way, obviously, because the E string in the violin will never be covered there. And if you can get that slight edge to it, I think it makes the next passage like much more exciting. Good. Then we get to the sort of thirds thing in 39, where again we're espressivo but not melody. So we have to find a way to make our chords feel warm and comforting for other people. And just get out of the way. I think the next time we want to really come, I mean, obviously we have our theme, but that's fine. And then we're really just looking for the end of the phrase. So bar 39, 2, 3. And then we can push a little bit. It's hard to push when we don't have the bottom. Good. Okay. So I get a little backwards somewhere in there, but I think it's fine. Great. So I think that balance-wise, everything that's good. Let's go straight on 46 now. I won't go too fast to start with. Let's hold the tempo. So bar 46. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no, I'm in quavers. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Three, 1. Okay, so the kind of sound we're looking for here, I think, is like the opposite to our beginning. So if we think of the beginning as the fat, rich vibrato sound, then I think we want the fastest thing possible. That like really fluttering kind of sound. In some ways, I don't think it's volume. It's easy to play loud, but actually it's more the breathiness that we want. And obviously that comes from the bottom, bom, bom, bom. But for everything to feel breathy, I think is the... Let's do a slightly slower version, because obviously there's a few tricky intonation-y bits in the middle. Dum, dum, da, da, da. That kind of speed. 3 and 4 and... Great, and we're there. What I found, actually, I never had an answer to it in my in the quartet, but what I found really interesting is the fact that we go into 4, and actually he uses that occasionally in other movements to sort of, actually it comes back later, just before we get to the recap of the beginning. So in bar 89, he also goes back into 4 for that little cadenza thing, and before we come back to the opening. I find it really interesting, the feeling, and I never quite got round to it. I think it's going to be something that bothers me for a long time. But, you know, the feeling that at the beginning you just have to think in 3, and now 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, the 4, why, and, you know, obviously it changes the meter, and it changes the feeling of the meter. But it's a kind of very interesting technique to use, and especially at the end of the section, when it's so short. He only uses it for 4 bars. And I just think it's something in the back of your mind that it needs to sort of be floating around. Like, really notice, oh, we're in 4 here. And how that changes the feeling. If anybody has some interesting thoughts to share on it, please do, because it's the sort of thing that just sort of whizzes around my head for a while. Okay, so bowing, da 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 dee da. Let's keep it like condensed in the lower half. I mean, you want it to be light, but not to the... Try and save your bow. And then use a little more there, but then you have to retake. So it's a kind of quite light, but a fluid movement. Bar 46, let's play a little more up to tempo now. Think of the phrasing, think of how you're using your bow. So 3 and 4 and... Great, and we will just go on from there in a moment. To be aware that at 51, we talked about this, didn't we? On Wednesday, there's like a pianissimo chord from the accompaniment, but we are forte, and the way I feel the forte is that we should stretch, ya da dee da da da, like really stretch each note, feeling quite broad. I did used to try a sort of snazzy fingering, and in the end I just gave up. It went in first position. So there's something about the string crossings, I sort of felt a little more comfortable doing the string crossing. It felt the intonation was always a bit uncomfortable.
Katie, can I ask, what about putting a slight comma in that bar 51? It's very hard for the rest of us to subito pianissimo when you're flinging off at the top there.
I know, it's tempting. But we have to go to that. What I think is the feeling is that practice it going to that tempo in the rest, going to that third beat, as in play forte for practicing. We'll do it a couple times, and because that's really where the phrase is going, right? I mean, there's no way that it's not going there. So to stop would feel really uncomfortable. But I think the reason it's less is to sort of feel like he's denying us something. Like it's not like we feel like we're going there, but because it's actually quite a short build up, you know, think of where we start. I mean, oh, it's the whole fugue, but really we've been driving there from 46. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars, which is not very long. And I think if you landed on it forte, let's try it. If you land on it big, I think it feels like this is the end of the movement. But actually, our main climax of the movement is coming up. You know, it's 78. You could argue it's 78 where the dominant the pedal, or you could say that it's 90. You know, so actually, I think that's why it's pianissimo, and I think it doesn't matter if it takes time to make the sound, because we're just flowing through. But try playing it loudly. I think it's a really slightly strange moment. Let's go from 50, and let's just do 50 for 3 bars. But the rest of you, try playing it loud. I mean, we play loud anyway. But join us and feel how good that feels. And then back off. So 50. So 3, 4, 2, 3. Yes, I didn't do a very good writ that time. So, yeah, that feels very satisfying, doesn't it? That should feel like, that it really goes there. And now, back off and just allow that, and we, in our heads, in the violins, we have to imagine that they're not with us. You know, we have to feel that the rest of the quartet isn't supporting that. They're sort of taking a step back. So it has a slight bittersweet feeling to it. It doesn't feel good arriving there. I always feel awful. I always think, oh, intonation, oh, the sound, you know. But if they were playing nice and forte, I wouldn't feel that. I would feel like nice and comfortable. So I think it's intentional. So bar 50, one more time. We'll go on this time. A bit better writ from me. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Great. Okay, so I think the one thing that we can do is just ease in bar 51 with our bow, rather than making it an accent, making it like a line. I think if we think of it as a sort of expressive C, third beat, I think, and feel that slight appoggiatura, da da dee da dee da, I think that can help it not feel so much like it's a sort of a arrival point. Now, let's look at string crossings. Let's try and get our wrists moving a little more freely. A little slower now from 51, third beat, please. And just think, da da dee da. Let's try and use the wrist to cross the strings a little bit more. 1, 2. Great. There are a couple awkward shifts there. I'm not sold on them, but it was somehow the most comfortable thing that I felt. I do re-articulate that G in the 3/4, so bar 53, because I think you need it. And you can either change fingers. Well, actually, it works quite nicely. Oh, I might put that in to a second finger on the. I mean, it all sort of does work in second position. And you can also, another thing to practice and to try would be at the end of 52, using your open string to then cross the string to a 4 on the F, so that you're like, the difficulty with it, it changes the color on that F is a little fuzzy, but I think it's worth trying to see if there's something that feels a little more comfortable. And then I think that sort of, it's a slightly uncomfortably awkward corner, but worth looking at any fingering possibilities just to see if there's something that feels a little more comfortable for you. Great. Okay, we're going to go on. Yes, we are going to go on. Okay, let's get to this climax. So we're going to start from bar 60 now. the other side of our page. So 2, 3. Three and 3 and 1. Two. One. Great, and then we get to our dominant pedal. Good. Okay, so a couple things to think about in terms of stroke. 64. I think we should try a version where we're a little more off the string. There's something, I always find the stroke around here a little disturbing. So obviously the second violin and viola have it just before, and we take over. And they're always quite short, so it always feels weird. A lot of people do play that marcato and on the string. Personally, I find it a little military, like a bit pokey, rather than having some, I just find it a little like staid, not interesting enough. So I think, let's try it. This is bar 64. A little like off, like a long off. 2, 2 and 3 and 3 and 3 and yeah, and then I always feel lighter at 66. Just for interest, play it, try it on the string, sort of upper half, just so that we can like feel the two extremes. So 64, 2 and 3 and 3 and 3 and yeah. I mean, the one I find impossible to do is 66, but you know, I could do it. Another solution would be to be slightly more off for 64, the first 4 quavers, and then the ba-ba being a little more on. So you could da-da-da-da-da-ba, so that the accents had a little more power, say a slightly different stroke. Let's try that. Excuse me. Let's try going into it from the bar before. We start down bow. So 2, 3. Three and 3 and I mean, I don't know what you think about that. That has a little, it's a mixture, but somehow it gives the accents have a little more power. They don't sound the same. It's a possibility, and I think it's worth playing around with that idea. Obviously the articulation is different on the accent, but then it like pops out, doesn't it? And then when we don't have the accents in 66, and anyway, the music is lighter. It's less, you have less of a sort of punch to it. So worth playing around with. Now, looking at 68, these sort of individual notes, 68, 70, da 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 da, yeah, da da. I always think of them as, you know, like traveling, almost like one note that has some inflection, rather than ba ba ba, you know, thinking of making them sort of more vertical. Think really linearly, push through, and try and make the same kind of color. I don't think it matters that they're separated so much. And I think it helps a sort of 2-bar feeling. Let's go from 68 on it. 2, 3, 1. here. This for me is the lowest point of this whole little bit. So the second beat of 75, and we collect everyone together. Da, da, ba, and we build. So all of these fortes we've had before. If we look from 63, we have forte, fortissimo, forte, 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 sforzando, forte, hairpin, sempre più forte, forte, and then crescendo. There is no way we can play this all that loud for so long. I think our audience would just switch off. They would think about something else. So I think the color of sound in your forte is important. So never not thinking the same. And also balancing is really important. So obviously everyone wants to hear a little tune, 71, then the sempre più forte, actually, I don't play sempre più forte, back off a little bit. This is in 72, because it's a different kind of sound, a little more movement, less sort of rigid. And then the forte at 74, less. I don't think it needs to be like massively forte. I mean, you will probably play loud, but I don't think we want to be pushing the sound, like trying. We're saving, aren't we, for 78? Okay, let's try 74. So 2, 3. Great. And then this is the moment that we want to play the biggest, the most expressive we've ever played in our lives at 78. But only for 2 bars. And then, despite the fact that it feels like we want to keep going, we have to get completely out of the way. I play about mezzo forte usually in the 3rd bar at 80. You just have to get completely out of the way. Or else the balance is just, this is young Mendelssohn. We have to allow the middle voices to come through, or else you just won't. So let's try that. So somehow backing off, but keeping some intensity in the sound, but not just nowhere close to fortissimo. 78. We get our 2 moments of two bars of glory, and then get out of the way for quite a long time. 2, 3. And then we're off. So the moment to come back in terms of sound, to lead the sound again, is the end of 84. That's the moment. And it actually doesn't have to be massively loud, but just everybody join in to hear that. And then, and then we've had quite a lot of sort of theme, which is kind of quite stable. And then we get back to 86 and we're back to the sort of feeling of 46 actually. Da, 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 dee, da, 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 da. But this time it's like so overly expressive. Let's just go straight from there. And actually sometimes I play around with hooking this. I think it is useful to think. Just as long as the little doodle thing at the beginning of 87 is right in the frog. So you actually are right there. That you're like nice and tight with your rhythm. But you can play around with hooking to see how that feels. I do, yeah, as you see, I hook the end of 89. I think it gives a slightly better sound. Okay, good. Let's go from 86 and let's just do the little cadenza moment. 2, 3. and that is the moment that you just have to save your like crazy. Really aim to get for that F natural. Aim to get right to the frog. Because you just don't want to split this one. Luckily, the second violin has the C, so we are the third lower at 93. So we don't have to worry so much about being the top primary voice there. Okay, let's just have a look. I'm worried that I didn't do the right number of da 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 da, but maybe I did in the middle there. My brain got a little bit excited. So once we hit our top note, we just have to think of all of the sort of techniques and feelings that we can have to help us reduce the energy. So obviously we have so much energy that's built up. I mean, you know, we are full of adrenaline and everything. And we have to find a way in a very short amount of time actually to calm down. I find when I'm looking at the slurring, it helps. So if we play kind of slightly analytically from the third beat of 90. So I split this one just for sort of ease. So if we do 2 and short, smooth, breathe, now smooth, great. So if you think of the short notes versus the slurs, I think that helps. And obviously the slur becomes more. And also feeling that we're actually going to the first G sharp, not the second. So it helps you still have a little bit of, I don't know, once you hit the first G sharp and then you have this little extra, you know, extra little shift and color, I think it helps wind down. So let's try. Let's do the whole thing from 89, third beat, not too fast, just to allow. So again, when we start it, use lots of bow, and then try and minimize that a little bit and go a little deeper in the sound as we get to the end of the second bar of it. So basically the last bar, 92, we want to be a little slower bow, a little deeper in the sound. Bar 89, third beat. 1, 2. Good. That was good. Just thinking of our shift in 90. I do often lift my bow. I find it's helpful. So all the other ones are quite stable. And then really think about shifting to the D. With the second finger. So if you think of where your second finger is going, and also lift the bow a little bit, because nobody else has that little dot at the end, and you just want to tuck it in. Da-dee, ba-ba, da-da. I did actually try for a while, taking a bit of time there, and it just felt a bit strange. I felt it myself. When I practice it, it feels quite good. But with everyone else, it felt a little bit like not the right feeling. They feel you need to go to that third beat. Have a bit of energy. Great. So when you're practicing, really think about the octaves. So we never get the D again. But that basically, well, that's what we're doing, aren't we? And every time you go down an octave, you have less and less energy, and you get deeper in the sound. Great. Okay, just to finish off this movement, I want to just play from 93, so the tempo 1. Obviously there are a couple changes, and then we'll just work on the color at the end. But let's just play the first bit, which is pretty similar, but just a different kind of sound, because now obviously we're not our fat mezzo forte anymore. We're like a sort of calmer piano. We have to find a way to make that color feel a little calmer, less overtly open somehow, maybe a little more personal, a bit more inward. So let's go straight on 93. 2, 3. Now, so sweet. Two. Finish to the end. Great, good. Obviously, if we lose too much tempo, you know, the bottom ba that slightly articulated chord it's interesting because it, you know, it probably just means it has some sort of movement to it rather than just a holding. It has a little bit of energy. I always feel that you want to keep the sound still warm and still flowing from 13, 14, 15, bar 16, 116, da da dee da da dee dum, like kind of easy feeling. And our real special chord comes here. How we find that color, just find that top note. To get the sweet, fastest sound you could, fastest vibrato you can find. The difficulty is finding that, but with keeping your bow nice and stable, isn't it? So yeah, it wants to bounce around a little bit. Yeah, so okay, try and keep. I would say that if it's bouncing, possibly there's too much pressure in the left hand. So think a little lighter, like the not pushing down so hard. Because if you push and then vibrate, the whole thing starts moving. Yeah, and the bit to practice, obviously, is where you have to change bow. Yeah, probably not right at the frog, but somewhere in the middle. So get that nice swell and then change the bow, ideally before the downbeat. So that you're, and also probably, and then allow that pianissimo. I like to really hold, you know, you can really think of the slowest bow you can on the last down bow that you're going to play. So you do a nice, beautiful swell. You need a bit of bow speed for that. And then slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down. And just try to hold some kind of noise. But the slower the bow, the better. Good! Okay. So lots of sound ideas in this slow movement. I think if you're in that sort of mood where, you know, you're looking out at the snow or wherever, and you want to work on some sound, just find different bits of the movement and just, explore with your vibrato and with the bow. I think they're really connected. The way your bow works and the way that the vibrato works, you can together make such a huge amount of change. And if you find the different passages, I often quite like working against a score, and just to see what everyone's playing, and just, okay, bar 1, and then let's look at, bar 17, and then just the last note, and then your vibrato is really going to do a lot of very different things. And I think and then your bow, if I do it like this and flat hair, what does it sound like? If I turn my hair away from me a little bit, what does it sound like? Just explore like the sounds on the instrument. And obviously the register makes such a difference. So, there's no way if from the beginning you can make it sound nice and warm, but as you go on, it'll be very different. Good. Okay, take a bit of a shake off, and then we've got a little bit of time to look at our third movement. We won't spend huge amounts on the sort of the scherzo bit. We'll do more of the middle, the outer sections. We'll do more of the middle, but it's always nice to play it and to feel where we are. There's my cold cup of tea. Okay, so in our rehearsals with this third movement, I think I had practiced it and I'd had lots of thoughts about the color of sound, and they just said to me, it just sounds a bit complicated. So it just needs to be the simplest, sort of easy, simple. You think you were like, oh yes, it's not the bowing wise is a bit awkward, so you're sort of trying to think of ways to make it feel a little more comfortable. For something that's simple, it's not that simple. But it has to sound like the easiest thing you've ever played. And then you have to do it twice or 3 times, as we go back to it, and feel as easy every single time. And that's the challenge, I think. To feel really comfortable and easy, but do it many times and just, nonchalant a little bit. Okay, so I'll count in. Let's do the repeat just so that we feel what it feels like to come either retake or up bow second time. So 1, 2. Great. So don't use too much bow on the first down bow or else you're in trouble. So I think of the F really quite low down the bow. So really try, don't spend too far, or else you get that horrible on the string feeling for the little D. I think it should feel like a bit light. And keep the rhythm like reasonably snappy, I think. One more time. 2. 1, 2. Great. So feeling dum bum bum, we go up there and that down at the end. It really helps, like, sort of bookend our phrase. Logistically, so getting from our feeling comfortable, obviously, with that second position, the end of bar 4, trying to keep it quite simple, the shift. I always, to get that E perfectly in tune every time, I always sort of have to think about it. Good, and then just light and free. I think it's possible to play faster. I've heard, I'm trying to remember. Well, I'll find it for this week. I've heard a couple really quite fast versions of this movement, and it's quite interesting to hear. When it does sort of speed along. It is allegretto, so why not? But sometimes it feels a bit disconcerting. You can also play it quite luxuriously and open. But let's one more time, for the second time from the beginning. 1, 2. And down. On. you know, it's quite simple, it's quite obvious, but just 16, 17, 18, 19, really like that swell on the second beat. That's such an amazing harmony. So you can even sometimes take a little bit of time there. There's a question mark, I think, always in the color. And then when you're looking at the end, at 23, that's where I would actually play a lot less and allow the interplay of everybody else to take the main stage, and we're just sort of repeating something.
Katie, just a quick thought.
Yes.
Would it help if we had a little smile on our face to relax us at the beginning of this movement?
Absolutely.
Because
Yes. Smile is always good.
A minor could be serious, but it isn't serious, is it? It's almost
No.
or is almost funny with the two players.
It is a funny feeling, isn't it? Because of the key, you could. I agree. I think it needs to have this like a lightness to it, and yeah, they know. However you feel, you know, a little lightness. Some people actually we experimented with. This is again very practical. I think your way of thinking of it is brilliant. Just smile and it will all just feel lighter. But you can also arpeggiate the chords in the middle voices a little bit to make them less. But boom, boom, boom. A little bit of, so they're not quite so sort of all together, and it has a little bit of a lightness and also more playful feeling to it. So I think that's always a really interesting way of getting the lightness and the conversation aspect around across. But yeah, definitely a little smile before you start. That's a good way of thinking. Okay, middle passage, please. We're gonna do a little slower to start with, and let's do slightly longer notes. Bum 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 bum, because we're gonna work on our stroke a bit. So violins start at first violins start at 35, and let's start slow and we'll build it up. 1, 2. 1, 2. Great. I started a little flat. So, I think we want to come from off the string. But, well, actually, I think we tried both. You can start on, but you just want the first note to sound the same as the other ones. You don't want... So... But just really neat, very close to the string. Let's try again. A little faster. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Great. And really, I always like giving a little sort of beautiful last note because I think, oh, we're finally there. So, let's now go a little faster and quieter. And 1, 2. 2, 1, 2, 1. It's good. My repeated notes was not working this morning, and now it is. Okay, so we got a little the character of it now. We need to find a little bit more, don't we? It's a little boring. So a little faster, and just the cheekiness. Obviously, we want that to have a little zing on it, but if we do a lot, it'll just stick out. So somehow keeping it neat. I actually play. I feel like I'm playing it on the string, but it comes off for the little repeated note. So rather than, I don't try and bounce. Just because of the way that the bow sticks. Everyone can try that. Just think more on the string, and with the like a slight flatter hair, it should bounce on its own. So, a little faster. Allegro di molto, we have to remember. And I'll give 2 bars. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Great. So the harmony and when you play this slowly, it's extraordinary. You know, every chord is different. It's really tricky to tune. But if we play from set 41 and just a little slow, like on the string. So 1 and 2 and to get that like beautiful shape, but quiet and soft and spiky. And da, 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 da. Let's go from there up to speed. So I'll give 2 bars. 1, 2, 1, 2. Good. And now, I don't know about you all, but I played that way too loud. So that is challenge getting the shape, but quiet. One more time. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Great. Okay, so see if we can go 1 notch faster from the beginning. Well, for us, from 35. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yes, good. Okay, and then we turn our page whilst the cellos do or not, depending on how you feel, play forte. Ba, da, 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 da. It's always a really strange moment, but I don't know. It had when we did it, because it was quite interesting, it always felt like something special, even though I know that it's not, I like Deborah, that was really interesting to find that it wasn't actually on the, in one of the manuscripts, it's just not there. But let's go from 51, 2, 3, 4, 55. We'll do a little slower to start with. So, and 1, 2. 2. 1, 2. 2. 2, 1. Yes, good. A little faster, that passage. So this is from the 5th bar. And 1, 2. 2. 1, 2. 2. 2, 1. On 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Oh, I can't count and shift at the same time. I will attempt to do that a bit better next time. Good. Okay, so there's always room for debate with these quavers with the dots. What did he mean? Why did he mean it? We tried a couple different versions, many different versions, but one idea is that you all play long, slightly longer, like just slightly longer than you play when you play them the semi with the dot, with the rest. So I'm looking at bar 5, 6, 7, 88, you play slightly longer rather than, technically they mean exactly the same thing, but he wrote it in, and he always wrote it in for this certain phrase. The other thing to think about in this passage is what you do with the drone note, because obviously some people are just playing, and if you play that as long, you can do, there are 2 camps. You can either play the drone note a bit longer and the other notes the same as the other, or you can play the melodic notes a little longer, get the drone a little shorter, or you can play them all the same. All the same long or all the same short. And there's no, I think we came to slightly longer and not as long with the drone was what we ended up with. But, it probably depends on how you're feeling on the day. But it's worth thinking about it, and it does change the technique of what we're playing, which is the sort of interesting bit, and it helps our melodic line. So let's just try that from 85. So I'll count in 1 bar, 1, 2. Great. And to be honest, the way I hear it in my head is that I like to think of it as just the phrasing is more interesting. To phrase it all more. So you do a little bit more with the phrasing, which means that your bow is doing a bit more, and that ticks the box. What I always get confused with, and I don't think I find it very difficult to achieve, is bar 92, 3rd beat. espressivo with the dots, with the little short notes. I mean, how you feel espressivo. I mean, I try my best to vibrate, but that's a challenge. Every time I get to that thing and I think, play more espressivo. And it's quite challenging. So I think it's more about the phrasing and think it's more about the engagement of the little bits of phrasing. Whereas at the beginning, we're thinking much longer line, and maybe here we become in slightly shorter, like shorter little units. And if you think like that, maybe that helps give this idea. Let's try that. Shorter units when we get to the longer bits, and more espressivo if you can at bar 92. I always find that first note never in tune. So 85, a little faster. So I'll give 2 bars. 1, 2, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2, 1. Great. Okay. So, food for thought. Practice it slowly. Da 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 da, just to really hear the harmony, and then get a little faster and a bit more off the string as you get. If you just accent the E string, I think you get those accents naturally. Now, we need to look a little bit, because I'd say this is the most horrible thing for us in this movement, is how we shift from a 4th finger E. And actually you could, if you feel comfortable, you can get to that E immediately, depending on how you feel. Some people don't like finger swapping. I tend to like to get to the E, but I guess with some practice. So this is sorry for everyone, but this is for us from, say, 103, how we get to that nice top A. Why don't we play from 103 and do the second time bar just a little slower. So go on to the second time bar. So 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yes, it's unbelievably uncomfortable to play. I think just knowing the pits part, it should be led by the rest of them, and we just sort of tinkle away at the top. That's how I think. So da 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 ba ba bum, ba 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 bum, and if we can sort of memorize where our part changes against the pits, ba 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 bum in the lower 3, I think that makes that work better. Let's try that again. 103. So 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. Yes, yeah, I mean, it's just, I think you just have to count it for a long time. Just to memorize the logistics of it. I found it very awkward. Not even just the shift up to try and get the top A in tune, but the timing of the second time bar, how to feel it and how to feel the writ. But food for, just think of the lower 3, and I think that really helps. Great. Well, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. I have run out of time. I am in deficit by a minute. Anyway, lovely to see you all, and I will see you all on Wednesday, and we will then next week we are doing the guest lecture on the Monday, so it won't be our 4th movement. So do prepare our 4th movement, so that when we're on the last week and we have our 4th movement to do, we will be all ready and all there. Anyway, thank you so much. I will just stop the recording.